So today we are talking about bottoms up versus sales led motion. This obviously has a ton to do with PLG, but it can also have more broad, we can talk about demand gen and how it plugs into all of that. But first, why don't we just do quick intros? So my co-hosts here, I'll introduce Karina first since she wasn't here last week. Yeah. Karina, go for it.
Yeah. So I'm Karina Edwards. I'm VP of Demand Gen Growth at Mattermade. I've been working with some clients like Loom, Calm, Product Board, Hopin. And so really running both like sales led and bottoms up side of business. So I'm really excited for this talk. And I will pass the mic to Holly to intro herself again.
I'm Holly, currently advisor at Loom and Impura, and a Teamflow previously at Slack, running their growth marketing, digital marketing, and before that at Google. And Eli.
I'm all that's left. I am Eli, and I lucky enough to work with Karina and lucky enough to get to partner with Holly frequently on clients as well. So I feel like we've gone through the trenches together now a couple of cycles, and we wanted to bring some of these stories to you and just some of the behind the scenes things that we're talking about. So that's the whole purpose here at Growing Unicorns live every week. All right, let's get into
unscripted.
It. Yeah, exactly. It's very unscripted. You're going to get a lot of probably more of our personality than you bargained for. All right, who wants to kick us off? Like, should we start with definitions, bottoms up, sales led? What are we even talking about?
I have a kickoff question, and I'd love Holly to run with this one. Can anyone do bottoms up? Like, should everyone be focusing on like building up a bottoms up motion? And is that how they should all go to market?
Oh man, like dive right deep. Personally, I don't think bottoms up is fit for everyone. I do think if a product has wide usage, has lots of use cases in tons of different departments, it's more of a horizontal product. Bottoms up is great because it like you don't have to go super deep in one particular use case, like vertical SaaS. If you're targeting a very complicated use case that requires a high implementation effort and sophisticated setup upfront, bottoms up is obviously very hard to do, especially in the context of user adoption. And finally, bottoms up, oftentimes the first user is more of the ICs and middle managers who are more willing to try out things, versus if you are targeting the buyer persona, like the CIOs, CEOs, or IT persona, you may not be able to get them to use your product bottoms up all the time. So you probably need to do a lot of work to get them to try your product. Those people, especially at enterprise companies, are very used to getting a demo and do the show in order to being sold to.
Yeah, totally. I like building on that. I think there's like PLG is the hot thing right now. And I think that you see a lot of like, there's two angles to talk about it. There's these companies who are like, have traditionally been sales led, and now PLG is a thing. So they want to move to a PLG model, either like entirely or just adding to, where like their product isn't fit for that, or the audience isn't fit for that. And I think on the earlier side, for early stage companies, I think you really have to think about like what motion you're going to start out with and making sure that the product supports that. Because generally when you hit that sales-led motion first and then try to reverse engineer back to product-led growth, like the product doesn't support that use case. And so like the trial motion, isn't something that's going to necessarily work, or their product isn't ready for that trial motion.
Yeah, the user experience is so important for bottoms up type of businesses. If the end user really needs a lot of hand-holding in order to understand how to use the product, how to make themselves successful, then you may want to make sure, one, the user experience needs to be really intuitive to potentially offering up scaled support early on so that they can get the product and start making themselves successful.
Yes.
It's interesting when you think about hiring for these motions, right? Because the type of marketing leader who's going to be successful with a bottoms up motion, they really need to be a pillar between product, marketing, and sales in a very hands-on collaborative way. Of course, ideally this person does that anyway and is involved in those roles, but even more so when we're talking about, what are these first experiences like? What's onboarding like? These are all very product intensive, and then the handoff to sales becomes intensive as well. So I think the challenge is on these executives to find the right type of marketer who has that blend, but still is a deep marketer without being just a product person.
Actually, that's a great question, right? Like for product-led growth companies, when does sales start to touch the customers or end users? What have you seen?
Yeah, I think it's different for every company, but there are certain metrics where the adoption is there, or typically there's more adoption across departments, which traditionally the PLG is going to be more successful for a horizontal product. So when the product usage starts to cross over department to department, that is generally one of the key indicators. But I think that's where marketing and sales has to be really tight knit with product to understand what are those key indicators within product usage that signal that they're ready to be even marketed to outside of the product, and then be touched by sales.
So, okay, good. I'm not on mute. Sarah, I see that you chatted in a question, and since we are a small group today, I would love to have you just ask your question directly.
Yeah, no, I was just sort of introducing myself. So I'm excited to be here. I'm enjoying this discussion. I think what I'm hearing and taking away is that bottoms up product-led growth. And this is how, Tribute's a peer-to-peer mentorship app for the workplace. And we've been sales-led, selling into business leaders, whether it's HR or sales and marketing. But we have a Teams and Slack app, and Teams has a monetization platform now where you can actually unlock a SaaS offering and have users or department heads find our mentorship app by searching mentorship in Teams and buy 200 licenses for their group. And so we're now re-engineering our product strategy to have this product-led growth from the end user. And what I'm hearing the whole discussion around, which I totally agree, because my background, I worked at Microsoft for 10 years. So I'm very familiar with enterprise software adoption, is that if you have more of a consumer-led product, even if it's being sold into the enterprise, it's probably a better fit for PLG than an enterprise-wide, something that you would sell to a CIO, or I don't know if that's a correct.
I don't know if it has to be so black and white per se, right? It's because it could be finding your micro motions or smaller value payloads within IT. what your entire product offers to the enterprise might not be the first motion or the PLG motion that you're driving. It could be a smaller subset of that's your wedge. And then there's a bottoms up plus top down play eventually.
Yeah, that's fair. That's actually fair. Yeah. I experienced this with a different app that we just started using, Alio, for OKRs. I downloaded it in Slack. I set my OKRs as an end user, and then I had to go back as the owner of my company and log into their web app and like think about the plans that I wanted to buy. And if I like who on my team, I want to make it available. So like, I don't know, it was interesting that like it did a good job of both, I guess, but we're just like right there in that transition. So, and Elias, I'm in the root systems group. That's how I kind of heard of you originally. And so that's kind of what brought me here. So.
Oh, perfect. Nice. Well, glad you're here.
Yeah.
Hey, so this is Nidhi. Great conversation. Just wanted to add to the part about micro motions. I've been recent, so I lead growth at Tessian. It's a cybersecurity company, so fits directly into a sales-led motion right now because it's like, and we are trying to penetrate enterprise and long sales cycles. So it's like definitely sales-led. But that said, I've been recently asked to do a growth experiment where a part of the our platform, which is a breach look back, is like being like extracted and like it's almost like a lead magnet where I'm being told to see if it will work, like it will pique the interest of cybersecurity professionals and they can use. So it's not seamless, like Holly just mentioned. It needs to be a seamless process, but that's not the case. But it's like, initial feeler, like, yeah, is the market like leaning towards that? But yeah, just wanted to add to the conversation that's what we are trying, even in that sales-led motion.
Yeah, I think something else just ending this entire topic is like making sure that there is a clear line that the bottoms up motion or the sales led motion like meets somewhere in the middle for both sides, right? So sometimes like the trial experience or motion or product usage like never really makes it so that user actually has to be a paid user, or that there needs to be like an enterprise, or the decision maker is actually involved in that conversation. And so I would love to hear like Holly, Eli, at what point does top down and bottoms up like meet in the middle to reach both the IC and like the decision maker?
I was thinking about Sarah's example, right? The mentorship SaaS offering that can be adopted by a manager for her immediate team of 5 people. And I would consider that as bottoms up. And I can also see a CHRO and say, we want to implement a mentoring offering benefits for my company. And that like, I want to see a demo of Tribute. And I can see both motions actually working for this case. So I guess like Sarah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think the thing that's stopping us right now is that we haven't built in like the automated user workflows yet to have people go through, like do the core jobs to be done in the product. Like we have to, a lot of that's manual today that is on our customer success team. And so we'll do that training through the sales-led motion from the point of buying to the end users rather than directly to them. We've started making progress. We've got Pendo installed and we're doing, some interesting things, but I think I think my assumption's correct that until we have the right automated user flows that they could just come in and quickly understand, okay, here's how I discover my first mentor. Here's how I complete my profile. Here's how I can attach this to my performance reviews. Like, here's why, what those hooks are that give me immediate value without having the buyer involved. I feel like that's also stopping us right now. Like we're building all of that before we can get there. And I think that's the right approach. We also want to start segmenting our sales team to be on like enterprise deals only. So like if you want to buy 200 licenses of Tribute, like you should just be able to like facilitate that in teams and like not have to bog our sales team down. Like that's the other unsaid thing here too, is that we're trying to like have sales assisted and sales led deals be bigger deals.
You have enough data to know statistically what actions in platform lead to that stickiness and that expansion of accounts, or hypotheses around that?
We do. Yeah. I think that's some of the work we've been doing with Pendo as well. So like feature
Nice.
tagging and all of that. So yeah, like I think we're doing the right things. I don't know, but this topic is just so like relevant. And so I'm just kind of here to like, just sort of hear what y'all have to say, what the conversation's like, and if we're thinking about it the right way,
Totally.
So,
pivoting a little bit on topic here. I'd love to just touch on the topic of like how the bottoms up motion really helps with the top down motion in terms of like retention when there is like user adoption at the IC level across departments or just like across the company, how that really facilitates like sales velocity and just higher ACV for the top down motion in the sales team.
I really like what you said, Karina, earlier on about cross-department adoption as one of the key signals. What I've seen is a few variations of this. It could be initially the person adopts a particular use case. They came in for this one use case, but then they start to discover other use cases of the same tool. And then as soon as they have like 2-3 use cases, and all of a sudden that person's engagement level is through the roof. That's the turning point. And 2 is when a few teams within the same company start to use this product. And that's a very strong signal of enterprise upgrades. This is not the one team who's just using this as a tool, like a tactics. This could be an org-wide deal, which really helps increasing that ACV for the product.
Yeah, totally. And that was kind of what I was mentioning earlier of like, even if an IC or like 1 or 2 people at a company or in a team have really high engagement and usage, like it's still hard to pull them through to more of an enterprise or like land and expand motion when that's not, the volume isn't there across departments or like across use cases, like you said.
Yeah, Sarah just mentioned +1 on cross-department adoption. We have that going on in Tribute today. Some of his multiple use cases, for example, onboarding, career development, then peer-to-peer learning. I think that's what I've seen in like lots of SaaS companies for that. Like that's the turning point. That's the inflection point.
Yeah. I would love to hear too, just back to like the original question, should every company be thinking like, so if you are earlier stage and you're like, how do we really want to go to market? Do we want to build more of like a product-led growth motion, or should we just approach, the old way of top down? Is product the single most important component of that decision, or are there like other factors, variables?
I would love to hear first from Eli.
I'm trying to think how to approach your question, Karina. In what context specifically? Because I think the context matters so much to what answer makes sense there.
Yeah, for sure. So if you're early stage and you're building out like your go-to-market motion, is it something that we want to like figure out what are our target account lists going to look like? Let's build out our sales team and let's really like hit that approach and build out our product to support like probably enterprise, features or things like that. Or if we're going to go the product-led growth model, is it like, let's make sure that we're building out like a badass product that's easy for IC usage, that's easy to get those like key indicators of like engagement. Is product the only thing that's like really the variable there? Like how you build out the product to support that go-to-market motion? Or are there other things in terms of like at a high level, is your product too complex?
Yeah. I mean, I think there's an inherent risk. It doesn't mean not to do it, but I think there is an inherent risk there where if you're leaning so heavily on product exclusively. You could over engineer, you could be building for the sake of building because you have this like massive vision and hypothesis, and you don't know when to pull up from that and really get the feedback from customers and users. And surely building a target list of accounts and testing your product in a sales cycle with those accounts is a great way to get very direct, very quick feedback. So, but equally so, bottoms up, getting end users as well is also a great way to get that feedback. So I think it's not so black and white necessarily, but more so what's the right balance, or how do you strike that balance between collecting end user feedback, which may be completely different than, depending on where you sit in the market, your buyer feedback, and figuring out the right way to balance that. Holly, calling back on some of your slack times, how was that approached there?
Yeah. I almost think about it as twofold. One fold is product development. Another fold is go-to-market motion. So from the product development perspective, what I love about product-led growth is it says, like, regardless of your go-to-market motion, the product and user experience needs to be so good that your end users would love to use it. And once they start using it, they keep using it. And then they cannot, like, if you rip it off, and they will like go crazy. So like, as a principle of product-led growth companies for product development, regardless of your go-to-market motion, that like product experience, user experience should be number one. In my opinion. And then there is go-to-market approach. Go-to-market, there is self-serve, which is bottoms up, and you get end users to start using it. And then you have sales-led lead gen, demand gen, like top-down sales motion. I see typically if the product is really easy to use, bottoms up works really well. In this case, Slack, right? Everyone understands workplace communication. Of course, Slack is a much more there's a lot more functionalities than just chatting, but as a minimum entry point, everyone understands talking to your team, chatting and communication, even though the workflows or like other integrations, there's like a lot more, but like people can start adopting. So bottoms up makes lots of sense for a simple to use, simple to adopt product. And sales led is typically very good for products that there I would say two cases. One is the product experience itself needs to be like, if the product experience itself is kind of hard to use, like some of these let's say complicated tools that just needs more hand holding, that's probably better for sales led. Or the access point. Access means I do need the HR systems or the HR person to open up access to the internal data in order to use my tool, or I do need IT approval in order to have access to my internal processes and data in order to use this tool. Then a sales-led approach makes more sense.
Yeah.
The other element too is like viral coefficient opportunity, right? Like inherently a chat platform, if you've invested in signing up yourself, then you're surely invested in getting your friends or colleagues or team or whatever it is on there as well, because it adds value to your use case. Whereas some tools, the lower barrier may be just going directly to the manager of the team and saying, here's all the utility this is going to provide to your team, buy it and drop it down on everyone, because the idea that one person from that team adopts it and then is going to be highly motivated and trusting enough of the tool to share it with the rest of their team. Like the timeline to that moment maybe faster with with top down in some cases, depending on the inherent nature and utility of the tool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like Marlo said, is like Salesforce. Yes, Salesforce is a primary example of, okay, like this is a pretty complicated tool. Like I probably need some sort of like salesperson to show me how it works, or like customer success person to help me on board.
Yeah. I think even if it's more of like a sales-led approach feels right for the product, I think there are still ways you can incorporate like product-led as like a funnel as part of that, right? And so like taking pieces of the product and trying to explore ways to get the customer to use the product, not in full, but maybe like components that are very directly calling to their specific use cases. So when I worked at Lytics, which is a CDP, which is like way too complicated to ever have like a full-on product-led growth model, there were product-led funnels that we could create with like components of the product, right? And allowing like certain users that would find certain components of the CDP really valuable. Like, how can we make that so that somebody could get their hands on it? And you start to see that more with like, I've seen product tours work really well for certain audiences. So for like the developers that don't love to talk to sales and or give their email for any type of like free trial, like here's a way that you can be exposed to a certain, not all, but like the most valuable parts of the product to get them to the next step in the funnel, the sales-led funnel. Yeah.
I was chatting with Kevin Marasco over at Zenefits. He's a CMO there. I think it was last week. And he calls these product snacks, which is, I love, like just such an adorable way to imagine deploying like a little product snack to folks, you know?
Yeah.
I love it.
Marlo had a question. So question for Holly. So Slack had a massive sales organization. How did your marketing and sales ops team go about determining what was sales qualified? How organic was the spread of Slack throughout an org versus sales assisted?
Mm-hmm. That's a great question. So Slack didn't have a sales org until much later. In early days, it's purely bottoms up adoption. And when Slack started to have a sales team is when we observe much of the SMB mid-market organizations started to grow into more of an enterprise customers who requires security, privacy, and some of the SSO and access admin features. And that's when the sales team really can be really helpful in talking through custom setups or making sure the org is really successful. So one is like company size was one of the determinants. Another one is like complicated setup to make sure. In terms of how do we go about determining what was sales qualified, we used a metric called PQL, product qualified leads. That is determined by the usage, primarily by usage. So you can think of your usage metrics related to your retention metric. So whatever your retention metric is, it could be like number of messages sent by the org, or it could be like number of people in the org, or it could be firmographic information like company size, etc. So it really depends on your particular use case. So the PQL is a signal that once an org reaches the PQL level, and sales team can get a signal to reach out to these folks for a upgrade or enterprise plan discussion.
Can I ask a clarifying question, or a couple maybe? So at what stage did Slack actually introduce the sales team? I'm just curious. I thought it was around the time you were there, but maybe not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Stuart famously said on record that we will never had a sales team. We will never have a sales team. But then Slack now has, I think like right now, like 1,000 people in the sales org.
Yeah. No, I knew one of your early sales ops people, and she's like, it's the easiest job for a salesperson in the world. So I remember that. So I was just trying to contextualize. And I guess my other question was Slack thinking about that like product-led usage metric in terms of individual orgs or accounts, or the combine of multiple orgs, perhaps across multiple teams in a company with the same domain, for example, like cross-departmental Slack instances that have been created but not connected to each other.
Oh, you mean if a company has different teams, all have their own teams, how do we
Correct. Like how
consolidate
were
them?
you guys thinking about that and like tying that into your metrics for like what becomes sales escalated?
Oh, yeah. I can't comment on like particular like specifics,
at a high level,
but
like,
I would say but like across the various clients I've had in SaaS businesses, that could be a very important signal. So yes, like we said before, cross org adoption is a very strong signal for a sales touch. Yeah, for sure. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think that evolves too a little bit over time, Holly. And like when they're super early and that data doesn't exist to really like mine, and over time the PQL like evolves just like your MQL should, right? So
absolutely,
the more behavior data you have to collect, the more that'll evolve. Initially, your PQL definition could literally be usage only, or like 2 metrics for usage. And you need to start somewhere, right? Like you probably don't have the full picture of all the data that could be available. And over time you say, okay, like, are they actually yielding the highest quality leads for sales? And we just adjust from there. Your like the data you're based the PQL model on, your customers are also changing, right? Like over time, your customer base probably changed from SMB customers to more of a mid-market audiences. Then your metric could change as well. So like Corinna said, definitely like for different, like review that every, 6 months or a year, depending on your growth rate, and change your PQL definition over time.
I don't know if it's helpful to add, but, I spent 10 years working at Microsoft, and I was baked in this enterprise sales led motion for technology adoption. And the one thing that I just think is interesting, because I was just looking this up the other day, Teams has 145 million daily active users. Slack has 12 million. So that's a pretty, and a large part of that team success has been Microsoft's, a behemoth of enterprise sales, right? We've got Microsoft has way more enterprise salespeople than Slack. And if anything, sometimes there are cases where if you are aiming for the enterprise, going after that sales led, if you get the right hooks of the company pushing the software down on their people, even though I think in this like SaaS PLG world, it's like, no, resist it. And, it should all be user led. Like there's benefits to that too. And I think for us, like, I saw over and over and over again at Microsoft, like there's just a technology adoption curve of certain things that just take time. And as long as you can identify, like, I think like fundamentally where SaaS and product is going is you have to capture and you have to be beloved by the user. Like you can't just build a shitty piece of software and like make companies go push that down people's throats. Like, I don't believe in that, but I do think like just listening to the conversation, there are things that I find when I go into sell tribute and I have the buyer hook of what the company benefit is of everybody using this together with that sort of like end user sort of product led growth. There's this hybrid, like if you're targeting the enterprise, I think there's got to be a hybrid motion. And that's so that you get an understanding of what to build for the enterprise to continue to promote your software org wide, because their list of requirements to deploy your software org wide is going to be very different from the individual of like why they're coming there to solve that pain point. Right. And if you're not building for that, you're going to run into adoption blockers, I think. Security, data, deployments, scale, all of those things too. So that's just my observation of my background, but.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think even if they're both motions definitely have a place, it's more of like the when and how do those feel and fit right. Yeah. I think even if you come from like a top down motion and really stronghold that, and you get the deal, if the retention isn't there from the user adoption side, you're not going to have
people hate it.
Yeah. And then expansion is harder. So altogether, like bottoms up motion and getting that user adoption is beneficial for the company long-term. But I do think for more, if not most, all companies are going to eventually need that top down motion. And so it's really understanding when and how to blend those two so that it is a good cadence.
Yeah. What's nice is if you have it, you're going to stay in touch with what it's going to take to build, what you need to build to make sure that you're enterprise deployable, enterprise wide. That's, I think, the biggest takeaway, that you're not missing that. It's a different league. Once you hit that, it's you've got to have different security and data. It's just a whole different beast. So,
yeah. Totally. And I think that there's something to be said about the question of when is the top down motion good to fit in with your bottoms up motion? What is that inflection point? But then also at what point have you kind of missed that buck? And I think that happens when, you're starting to do the sales led motion and your sales team is we need these enterprise features. And the product side is absolutely don't want to incorporate that. We're really focused only on the user side of the product. And then that's kind of where the traction is hard.
Mm-hmm. I think you'll hit a ceiling at some point, and you'll need to think about how to keep scaling from just an alternate perspective, from what I've seen. But it's been interesting, being a lifelong Microsoftie, building the SaaS. It's very counterculture, to the way, and I mean, it's super fun because I get a respect for that, but I love being in this space where I get to almost take a consumer-led approach to enterprise software, because that's how people want to consume technology today. It should just work, and it should just be easy, and I should just tell me what to do, so it's pretty fun.
Totally. Needy had a question in the chat. And so she says, in a sales led motion, how to approach growth marketing? I would love if you can jump on just to say more about that question. She might not be able to jump on.
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Yeah, I would love for you just to expand on your question.
Yeah, so basically my company is a sales-led motion today. We have tripled our sales team in the last 2 months. As I said, we are in email security. So we're trying to get into enterprise. So the idea is my role is in growth marketing. So how should I be approached? What should I be thinking about? So currently it's all about experiments and getting demos. That's basically my metrics. So just wanted to know if you guys have ever been in charge of something like this, what has worked for you guys?
Yeah, I'll take a stab at this one. And then Holly, I would love to hear yours. So just for me, it's really brand drives demand. And so there's 2 angles that I approach when it's growth marketing for the sales led motion, and demo is the KPI is identifying that there's going to be a point where you capturing existing demand, that well goes dry. And so you have to be thinking about other ways that you can start also creating demand so that just becomes an engine that's always running. Holly, I would love to hear from you on that.
Yeah. A lot of sales-led organizations go with the demand gen motion of getting MQLs, SQLs, and close one, and that motion. I think for a modern growth marketing org, you want to make sure you're running experiments to get the highest quality leads that actually tie to your pipeline and close one. So often that marketing teams just focus on getting MQLs, but are actually not like highest quality. So that's one, like from a measurement perspective, you want to look at your downstream metrics. And two is oftentimes the traditional B2B demand gen motion focus more on the content syndication. Let's publish a white paper and get some email list, and then start to get sales team to start calling on them. I'd say in a modern growth marketing org, I would think about nurturing them and touching them in more channels before necessarily handing off to sales team and just forget about them. So for example, you may want to touch them via, let's say, display or YouTube or even TikTok of the world, so that they are warming up. You may even send them in like personalized looms to help them to understand things. So I would think about like more channels to warm them up, to shorten the sales funnel, rather than just passing it off. And thirdly, what I've seen a lot of sales-led companies do is really think about how they want to approach account-based marketing, right? Like account-based marketing has been around for 5-10 years, but the concept itself is evolving. And it's not only about let's just get a list of 10, 100, 1,000 accounts. It's also about how do we engage with these accounts? How do sales and marketing think about SLAs? And when do we actually want to get those whales to talk to each other, or existing customers to talk to prospect customers? How do you engage them both in online and offline in a motion that feels personalized and without really have high touch for everyone? Like, how do you think about your support or like a sales motion? So I would say these three aspects for growth marketing. How do you support an account-based world without just saying, we have 100 impressions from this org, so account-based marketing is successful. There are various things that you want to measure the key metrics.
Thank you.
Awesome. Cool. We have another question from Marlo. So a topic possibly worth discussing, maybe not, in the earlier stages of a PLG company's journey. How closely do you think marketing should be tied to analytics and roadmap prioritization? For example, 10 to 15 employees, what should be marketing's priorities at the seed to Series A stage?
I mean, I'm biased. I think marketing should always tie to analytics and product prioritization. It's like you want to measure your efforts. You want to show or even like understand for yourself where am I putting my efforts and how those efforts are tied to the bottom line of the company. So from day one, I would tie marketing to analytics. You want to focus your efforts on the most important features or product direction.
Yeah, I think that's like going back to the tripod reference at the beginning of the conversation. It's like setting up the foundational pillars such that these initiatives that separate groups are working on are anchored in some sort of common language.
Yeah. And I just echo the earlier sentiment of like these things evolve. And so there's always going to be an element of like, what is our foundational set point? What are our foundational analytics? And then I would say making sure that those analytics are also not necessarily the same as other departments or like other teams, but making sure that they actually see through to those other teams' analytics as well. Because to the earlier conversation, I think what happens with marketing is that we look at only one piece of the full picture because maybe that's all that's been expected or expectations are only set for those specific KPIs. But I think largely the impact will be better, more significant when you can consider like the full spectrum and how those actually play into other departments and just like the full analytics.
Yeah, one mistake I see marketing team and product team may make is the silos. Marketing team only owns up until people sign up, and product team owning everything after sign up. Like from a like a major work scope perspective, that makes sense for many companies. But from the team collaboration, communication perspective, marketing should be accountable for how successful these people are, right? Like if I think lifecycle marketing is one of those connection points where you do want to work very closely with the product team to make sure the people who sign up are super successful. Marketing team do want to work with customer success team to ensure you're touching people with the right content at the right time. Especially in early stage, everyone should do support. Everyone should understand what the customer is saying from product feedback and customer success feedback perspective.
Yeah. Marlo, I just saw your clarifying question, and it was, she said to clarify, the instance where the marketing department is driving product usage analytics in the absence of there being the right resources on the product side, is that a problem or not? I feel like if it's seed Series A stage, maybe, but I think in the beginning, it's when you're that early on, I think marketing, if there is nobody else doing it, it's kind of like marketing really needs those key indicators to understand, post sign up or post like in product, how people are using the product. But Holly, I don't know what your was on that.
Yeah. What you're saying is there's no one really looking at product usage data. I actually think about like marketing can mean many different things. Marketing doesn't only mean you're getting people to sign up to start using the product. Marketing also means we're making people successful. So in absence of a product analyst who can look at amplitude, you can say, okay, like marketing is driving growth, right? Like ultimately marketing drives growth, and product usage analytics is part of driving growth. So it doesn't matter who owns it. It can be the marketing department. If you have a strong growth marketer who just like understands data, who can communicate really well with the product team, I don't think that's necessarily a problem. But over time, as you scale, you may want to have a dedicated person to really look into product usage analytics, because the need isn't going to increase, and it may not be like one person may not be enough to look at all of these.